It's not often that a book speaks to me so personally. As the eldest of 6 children, including 5 girls, I've always been fascinated by family ideals and struggles and conflicts, and politics, and how a family remains together despite all of these issues. The text I've chosen to speak to you about today is really about that, a family that's in trouble. And at the heart of it, a young woman struggles to find her place in the world, battling class and gender boundaries, and tries to keep her dysfunctional family together in the process. The novel I'm referring to, of course, is Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and that's what I'm going to be speaking to you about today. Upon examining the outline for this English unit, True Blue, I was struck by something, the question mark. Why aren't our teachers certain about the title of this unit? Don't they know what the unit's about? So thinking about the title, I thought that being True Blue was kind of about what it means to be an Australian. But the question mark made me think, maybe there are some other alternatives for this. So maybe like the idea of honesty or being true to yourself or whatever. But then I had a cheeky Google of the term and I found something that was a bit surprising. The origin of the term True Blue actually means to be a loyal supporter of the British Conservative Party. And this kind of made sense to me after a while because royalty is kind of known as having like blue blood. So maybe this unit could be considered having an English flavour or a British flavour. So in this speech, I'm going to contend that Pride and Prejudice actually does address the key ideas of this unit, including national and personal identity. But to understand why this is so, we need to talk about why this lady, Jane Austen, is so cool. Now, she was born in 1775, the end of 1775, and she began writing stories and plays and poetry when she was just 12 years old. So being a typical 12-y, she wrote mostly funny, silly, stupid stuff. Like she wrote parodies of her history textbooks, like The History of England, which was written by a biased, prejudiced and ignorant historian. So this was when she was 16, and this shows that at that age she was dissatisfied with the depiction of her country's history and their identity. She also wrote parodies of romantic novels in her day, and by the age of 23, Austen had written first drafts of the novels that later became Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice and Northanger Abbey. Jane Austen never married and thus had no children or descendants. She spent her life devoted to her writing. And this is really big because in this way she challenged what it meant to be a really demure Regency woman. She died in 1817 of a disease that historians now claim was Addison's, which is like an immunodeficiency disease. And in her lifetime, Jane Austen was well aware of the horrors of the French Revolution and the effect of the Napoleonic Wars. This is Napoleon here. And this war had real implications for the economy of Britain and its people. So her cousin's husband was actually guillotined in this war, and her brothers Frank and Charles were officers in the Royal Navy. So she had a personal connection. Her novels, including Pride and Prejudice, centre around the trepidation and the fear and the instability of Britain during this time and involvement in these wars, and the financial woes that encumbered a lot of citizens at the time. Also during this time was the idea of these guys here. So here's Regency England, but these guys here, the landed gentry. So these are the few people in England who could own land at this time because of rigorous inheritance laws. And Pride and Prejudice definitely deals with this. There was an exclusive social class that left many people in perilous situations for their social survival. And because of this, marriage was a key strategy for women to maintain their financial security. But however, the Industrial Revolution was about to come in and change this landscape forever. So she sort of saw the start of that. So as a result of this, if I can get this to work, some of the ideas we'll be looking at include the idea of pride. So not being able to kind of let go and thinking you're kind of on top of everything and thinking you're better than other people. So we'll be looking at, does a person's pride blind you to the true character of others? And can a person's arrogance really define them the way that it does Mr. Darcy here? Another idea we'll look at is prejudice, which we've already looked at in Deadly Unna, but it'll be slightly different. this idea that you're blinded or you make preconceived judgments about other people. So how can a class system and having judgments about class define a nation? And do first impressions really matter? And the novel deals with that. We'll also look at this idea of family. Family is really important in this novel. How does a family shape who you are as an individual? And how can a family reflect the values of a nation? And finally, one of the other ideas we could discuss is this idea of gender. So, is a person's identity confined to just their gender? How is gender related to identity at all? And does a person's reputation rely on conforming to these expected gender roles? So it sounds like a lot, and what kind of story could cover all of this in one whole novel? And I'm trying to make it a little bit easier because it is a little bit of a long novel. So I've tried to get the plot across to you with a comic, and I know it's a bit fuzzy, so I'll try and explain it as best as I can. So the main characters are these guys here. You've got Elizabeth Bennet. She's the main player, and she's a really, really smart, kind of almost sort of feminist kind of person in the novel, and she's the second eldest of 5 girls. And the eldest of them is this lady here, Jane Bennet, and she's the pretty one of the 5. Then they've got their mum, Mrs. Bennet, and she's really, really, really concerned about what's going to happen to her daughters and their family in the future because they're not allowed to inherit because they're female. So she's trying to marry them all off. She's really determined to marry all of them off. But her husband, Mr. Bennet, is a little bit more chilled, a little bit laid back, and is kind of almost the opposite to her. They're a bit of an odd couple. Then you've got this Mr. Bingley guy, and he's the one that he buys a house nearby to the Bennets, and he's really rich and handsome, and he's got his eyes on Jane, the sister, and they're kind of like, oh, that'll be great, he'll keep the family in check, we're not going to be destitute because he's got money. Then we have Mr. Darcy, and he's actually the other lead character in this. And he's really stuck up. He's Bingley's friend, and he's like, nah, Bennets are rubbish, don't go anywhere near them, we're better than those people. But he secretly, I'll talk about it in a second, has a bit of a fancy for Elizabeth but can't really bring himself to like her. Then we have Mr. Collins, who's this big-nosed fellow over here, and he's actually a relative of the Bennets. And because the women can't inherit, he's the closest male relative. So he's going to inherit the house when Mr. Bennet dies. So they're obviously really, really worried about this. So basically the plot is this Bingley guy comes nearby and fancies Jane, and Darcy says, nah, not good enough, they're all rubbish girls. But we actually know from some narration she puts in that Darcy has a little bit of a thing for her fine eyes. He's got a little bit of a crush, but he doesn't really acknowledge it. Mr. Collins comes and addresses the fact that he's going to inherit the house and actually wants to marry one of the daughters. And he asks Elizabeth to marry him, and Elizabeth's like, no, you're an absolute creep, not going there. And Mrs. Bennet's like horrified, how could you do this, we're going to be in ruins. In the meantime, Darcy actually confesses his love for Elizabeth, which is really, really weird. And she's like, how, this came out of nowhere, you were such a jerk, no way is this going to happen. And all of a sudden, we kind of meet this guy called Wickham, and he's a soldier, and he runs off with the youngest Bennet daughter. And this is a really big deal because they're not married, so it's kind of like the biggest scandal ever, and they're going to bring the family to ruin. And in the end, Darcy kind of helps his family get back on track and lets them get married, makes them get married, so that the family can sort of have their reputation back and all that sort of stuff. And in the end, they fall in love and all that kind of stuff happens, but that's incidental. So now it's for the nerdy English part of this. How did Jane Austen use those wordy words of hers? Well, in order to tell this and link with the idea of challenging the true blue, there are a couple of key techniques that we can look at. And the most famous of these